the roll, verify the quorum.
Yes, sir.
Are more willing to lean towards.
Dave Merritt,
Present.
Marty Whitmore,
Present.
Tom Alvey,
Here.
Kathy Chandler Henry,
Present.
Mike Richard,
Here.
Bill Trampy,
Here.
Dan Winery, Steve Aquafresca,
Here.
Tom Gray,
Here.
Mark Catlin,
Here.
John Ely, Al Vandenbrink,
They talk about Overmeyer.
Doug Monger,
Here.
Reby Hazard,
Here.
Karn Stegelmeyer.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. And if you have any noise in the background, could you please mute your microphone so we don't have that going over the top of this. We are calling to order the hopefully the last board meeting of 2020 for the Colorado River Water Conservation District and the Water Projects Enterprise Fund. We are here to essentially adopt a budget for next year and act on a few different additional recommendations from the staff. The first item we have on the agenda is the budget hearings. We have quite a different budget. Yes, sir.
If I may, Mr. President, I just wanted to turn to general counsel and see if he needed to amend the agenda. There's a general counsel's item on the listed on the agenda, but I didn't know if Peter wanted to make that more specific. Peter.
Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mr. President. I think we can just leave the agenda as is and we'll cover it under the general counsel update. Sorry for that.
Okay, thank you. But before we go into this, we have a budget that is twice as large as it was about a month and a half ago. And I want to thank all of the board members and the staff for the work that was done these past few months on getting that our new budget passed. I mean, it is a enormous change for the River District going forward. The general manager and the staff are going to have quite a challenge in the board as we go forward to expend these funds in a responsible and efficient fashion. So I do want to thank everybody for what was done on getting that passed, and it was an amazing majority that we had. That was the final district-wide 73%, Mr. Mueller.
Well, I was actually going to just as a intro to the budget hearing, just show you a quick final certified results from 14 of our 15 counties, if I could. And
okay, yeah, let's go.
With your permission, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Just so that doesn't look like the right screen, does it? Let me try that again. Let's see if I can. It should be the right screen. Let me try. You're not looking, I take it you're not looking at results of ballot issue 7A, correct?
Not yet.
Okay. How's that?
I'm seeing it on mine.
I could see it.
You see it now?
No, I saw it earlier.
Oh, you saw it before. All right. Well,
Yeah.
good. Sorry. There. Now you see it.
There. Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So yeah, the total down here at the bottom of the page is 72%. So 191,056 votes in favor, 74,064 against, so 72-28. These are all final from certified by the clerk and recorders. Gunnison is in red because unfortunately they have had a what sounds fairly catastrophic outbreak of COVID in their clerk and recorder's office. And so they've actually have at least one of their staff members in ICU and others out sick. So it was a pretty significant hit there in Gunnison. But nonetheless, I think I was giving Reby a little bit of grief, but to be honest, we carried every county You know, probably the top, just to emphasize, is Pitkin County at 80% of the vote, which was very impressive. Every other county was above 60%, or even 65 or 61%, I guess, Moffett. But the Saguache County, unfortunately, we lost in Saguache by 9 votes, which was a 45-55 split. But it really shows an impressive amount of support and for 7A. And I do really want to thank all of our directors for their work on this. While it means that the staff will have a tremendous amount of additional work ahead of us, it's a pretty exciting chapter in the River District that we're opening up here, and could never have done this without the support of the board, without the leadership from the board, and the efforts that were pursued. And I want to say, I mean, the board did an amazing job. I also think that it's important to recognize that the amazing coalition of support and entity, the different entities that worked on behalf of question 7A was truly amazing. And, you know, it wasn't just the 65 organizations that endorsed the question, which was unprecedented, I think, on the Western Slope. But it was the political diversity, the economic diversity of those organizations, the mission diversity, where, you know, when was the last time you saw the Environmental Defense Fund and the Grand Junction Chamber of Commerce on the same side of an issue? And so it was just really exciting to see that. We received tremendous help from all sorts of conservancy districts and our own or NGOs and local governments. They gave us lots of opportunities to provide education and outreach. They gave the campaign lots of opportunities to provide campaigning information. It just really was a phenomenal widespread effort that I want to really acknowledge how many people helped and how broad that support was. So we have a bit of a, I would say, a bit of a burden coming with that. It's great news, but it's also a lot of responsibility for this board and for the staff. And I certainly feel it, knowing that we've got to make sure that we steward these funds really well. So we'll get into that in the second part of the meeting. But with your permission, Mr. Merritt, I think at this point, opening up the hearing, or is it your preference that you have a information from Ian and then officially open the hearing, or do you want to open the hearings?
I think I'd like to get information from Ian on the budget and how he intends to spend all this money. and then we'll open up the hearing itself and going through the 8 or so resolutions that we have for adoption of the budget. Yep. Okay. Mr. Phillips?
All right, very good. Good afternoon, directors. With the passage of ballot issue 7A, we're going to realize an increase to our revenue of $4,908,592. This is the difference between the 2019 mill of 0.234 when we were Tabor restricted to the 2021 mill of 0.5. If you recall, the number of maximum or potential increase within the ballot question itself was a little higher than what we're going to realize by about $60,000. And the difference there is the result of the drop in the valuations. If you recall from our workshop back in October, the valuations dropped by about 1.33% from last year to this year. So the other good news about the passage of ballot issue 7A is that we no longer have to run through the DLG 53 calculation each year. I know a lot of you directors are bummed to hear that. I'm just kidding. one of those crazy worksheets that we would run through each year with the values and the potential increase we could set our mill at. And because our legal team was so crafty with their language in the question itself, we no longer need to perform that calculation. So in essence, the state's going to stop tracking our revenue limitations. So of the increase that we will realize, along with the fiscal implementation plan, 86% of that increase will be allocated for the partnership program within the general fund. And that number, 86% of the increase, is $4,221,389 for 2021. And if you recall, the other 14% was going to go towards fixing some of the issues due to Gallagher and declining fossil fuel valuations. So we're proposing to move about 530,000 from the enterprise fund into the general fund. And along with that increase in the general fund, well, actually, let me back up for a second and talk about the historical splits that we used to have, or that we currently have in 2020. If you recall, we have got a 75% allocation to the general fund and a 25% allocation to the enterprise fund. On a lot of expenses, there are certain expenses within those that are either 100% gen or 100% enterprise. But what we're proposing to do is remove that shift, that split of 75-25, and have a different split for not every employee, but within the departments of employees. So for the board, we're proposing a 90% general fund allocation and a 10% enterprise allocation. For certain admin staff, the general manager, the chief accountant, the chief of operations, the accountant, and the contract administrator, we're proposing a 95% general fund allocation and a 5% enterprise allocation. And this is based off of the timesheet analysis for employees from January through mid-September of this year. So we're looking at timesheets, figuring out their allocation on the timesheets, and proposing a budget that's more in line with those allocations. The legal team would be 80% general fund and 20% enterprise fund. External affairs would be 100% enterprise fund. And within the tech department,
100% general fund.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to say general fund. Thank you. Within the technical department, it's a little more challenging. It's not as clear cut. So within that department, there's a range of 50-50 split for deputy engineer, and there's even 100% general fund allocation for the partnership program manager. So there's kind of a range in there. We're proposing the chief engineer and some of the deputy chiefs be an 85% general fund and a 15% enterprise fund. And then of course the Wolford employees will remain 100% at Wolford or enterprise. So along with those changes, we have an increase to the salaries and benefits budget within the general fund due to the replacement of the Director of Community Affairs and the hiring of the Partnership Program Manager. And both of those positions are 100% general fund.
So if I can, Ian, I just want to for a minute and just make sure that we're being clear with the board that the proposal we're bringing forward is that this year for 2021 and future years, that we split these employees based upon actual time spent in the prior year for the first 9 months of the year, because it's that period of time before the normal budget cycle. So we have an estimate, a current estimate of, or actual time spent, from the previous year. We'll apply that to this year, this coming year. We'll do that every year so that it's not a set number, but it's going to adjust every year based upon time actually spent by the employees. We just feel like this is a more accurate way of accounting between our enterprise and our general fund. And I know that the staff used to do this some 15, 20 years ago. Our time tracking ability has improved greatly, so it's much easier since everything's digital and fairly self-executing. So that's really what we're proposing, is a programmatic change going forward as to how we split these costs, employment costs. And then just to touch on those positions, if you remember in the budget that you reviewed in October was kind of a worst case scenario where we were dealing with both the impacts of Gallagher and not having 7A pass. And so we were not planning on replacing the community affairs director when he retired, because we were going to anticipate significant budget cuts coming in the 2022 fiscal year, and we were getting ready for those. This budget restores that position, which we currently have, so it's not an additional position. The other position that Ian just mentioned, which is a partnership projects manager, someone who will manage this new fund, is a movement of a full-time equivalent position that exists today in the EA team, our communications fellow position. We're not going to go out and renew or rehire for that position. So that position will be moved over to the tech department and will become a partnership projects manager. So we're not increasing the staff numbers. We're just moving those positions around so that we can best staff our department. But we are giving up that fellowship position this year. I will tell you that our current fellow who worked incredibly hard on our outreach efforts was tremendous. Eleanor Hassenbeck did a great job. We benefited tremendously from that. So it's not a comment about her performance by any means. It's just we've got to allocate our resources in a way that makes sense for the organization. So just I'll hand it back off to Ian, but I wanted to make sure everybody understood what Ian was talking about. So sorry, Ian, go right ahead.
No, thank you, Andy. I appreciate that.
President Merritt, do you want questions as we go, or do you want them at the end?
You're on mute.
Mute.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to take questions as we go. Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Ian or Andy, can you remind me what is in the budget as far as salary increase or cost of living increase for staff, and what the health insurance split ended up being?
Sure. I can tell you that our salary increase pool this year was a 1.5% increase based upon the Mountain States employers, or the employer councils numbers that we use every year. And that is significantly lower than it's been in the past, but that's certainly understandable given the pandemic and what's going on with local businesses. The other question you had was the health insurance, and I think Audrey Turner is probably best to answer that. Audrey, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so it ended up being about a 5% decrease overall in premiums this year because of our.
You did well.
Well, it's a big change. The Western Slope Healthcare Group is no longer, so we had to shift our health insurance to another provider. But yes, it's much better news than last year.
And how is the general coverage compared to the West Slope Healthcare Group?
It's very similar, similar networks, similar benefits. It should be, other than the enrollment process, an easy transition for employees.
Okay, well, very good. I'm sure you didn't plan on becoming a healthcare expert when you came with us, what, 12, 15 years ago.
Hardly an expert, but I've learned a lot.
I'm sure you have. They've done a great job. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for that info.
Yeah, Ms. Egelmeyer.
Yeah, I have a question just in terms of enterprise versus general fund. It's hard to tell the future. So does that mean that 9 or 10 months in, there needs to be an amendment?
Yes, that is true. Typically, 9 to 10 months into the year, we always do the amendment process. So we'll be refining the expenses or the budget in September, hopefully next year.
So will you adjust then the expenditures based upon actual timesheets? Say it was, somebody was anticipated to be 85% general and they were 90%. Would you adjust that, or do you just adjust that for next year?
Dave, our proposal is that it be set for the year.
Okay, set for the year. And then
adjusted on a prospective basis, not on a retroactive basis. I think that the actual accounting burden would be not worth the return to the district.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Good clarification there. Thanks.
Good question. Does
Any
anybody
other
else?
questions as we're moving along?
Okay, I don't see any.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll continue.
I had one quick question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andy, the legal expenses, and so I thought I saw that there was a fair amount put into the general fund, and I guess if we're having discussions on Wolford, is that we'll deal with that when we get there, I assume, probably, huh?
We're comfortable with the currently budgeted amounts. Yeah, as far as the future, if we have to adjust midstream, the budget process does provide some flexibility on that.
But I guess my intent of the question is those would come out of the enterprise fund if in relationship to Wolford or whatever we in our. Thank you. I see Andy nodding his head. Thank you. That's fine. All I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, continue.
Okay. So going down through the memo, I'm going to start with the directors since they're at the top of the summaries. We're proposing a change of about $12,000 from the enterprise to the general fund for directors and officers category. And that's related to the director fees, the travel, the meeting expense, and registrations.
We haven't had much of those this year, have we?
No. Then continuing on down, salaries, the general fund is increasing by about $473,000. That's a combination of the shift from the enterprise and the positions that Andy mentioned earlier. The overhead.
I noticed the out year, Ian, I noticed
Yes.
the out year was down from the 2021.
The out year?
The 2022.
Oh,
Projected staff salaries. We're seeing
yes.
more of an increase in 2021 and then a decrease in 22 on that.
Yes. So there will be a little bit of overlap, I think, in 2021 with the retirement of some positions.
Okay.
And then the replacement of those positions. And then in 2022, it reflects no overlap.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Should I keep moving on?
Keep moving. Continue. Yeah.
Okay. Get back here. So then getting down into the admin department, or excuse me, travel and meetings, we're proposing a shift of about $40,000 from the enterprise fund to the general fund. And again, that's all the departments of travel, registrations, and meeting expenses. Then going on down to legal special counsel, we're proposing a shift of $12,750. Not a huge amount there. And that's mostly related to the miscellaneous legal materials and some notice and some miscellaneous legal items. As mentioned in the memo, we're going to keep the split at 75-25 for the CRCA efforts that have been ongoing for quite a few years now. And the reasoning behind that is we collected the cost share contributions from those partners back in 2017 and recorded them at that split. So we're going to finish out this effort at that split. Going on down to admin expenses, we're proposing a shift of almost $70,000. Those are all decreases in the enterprise fund, with the exception of our liability insurance. And we trued that up to be, it's more in line with the actual cost of the valuation of those replacement assets. So that shift is about $70,000 for the admin. And then continuing on down, external affairs, we're proposing that this department is now 100% general fund. And as a result, we're going to move $41,000 from the enterprise fund to the general fund. Most significant amount in there is for the education programs line item, $25,000. And then going on down to technical support, we're not proposing any shift there. We've already got those accounts allocated correctly, properly, I should say. So that pretty much takes us through all of the adjustments. If you notice on the general summary, there's a new line item on there called project assistance. So you can see our 2021 bottom line shows a positive number of $226,000 for the general fund 2021. Do we have any questions? You want to move on to the capital fund?
Yeah.
Just there's no changes to the capital fund. Nothing to really highlight there unless anybody had any questions on that. Okay.
No.
And then that takes us to the enterprise fund. We've covered all the changes, the shifts that we're proposing, and you can see in the 2021 budget for the enterprise fund, we're showing a positive figure of $121,929 for 2021. And it's a positive figure in 2022 as well. So a good sign of things within the enterprise fund turning around. So if I don't see any questions, we can proceed to the resolutions, and unless there's any other discussion.
Are there any questions or discussion on the budget? Is there, I guess before we go to the resolutions, is there any questions or comments on the budget from the public that we have before we proceed to resolutions? I don't see any hands up or anything going on there. And we do have staff and public there joining us, which I appreciate. Okay, we're going to proceed through resolutions now. Our first resolution, my packet is resolution to amend the 2020 general fund budget. We have a motion on that.
Kathy Chandler Henry, so move.
Okay, we have a motion to amend the 2020 general fund budget. Is there a second?
Second. Whitmore.
Second from Ms. Whitmore. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Okay, now we have the resolution to adopt a 2021 general fund budget, which differs significantly from the 2021 budget that we would have adopted previously. So we have a motion to adopt our 2021 budget.
So move.
So moved by Mr. Who that was.
Aqua Fresca.
Mr. Aquafresca. Okay, we have a motion, Mr. Aquafresca. Second by, second by Winery.
Winery.
Yeah, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. We have a resolution to amend the 2020 Capital Projects Fund budget.
So moved, Richard.
Okay, motion by Richard, second by,
Second.
Vandenbrink
Hazard.
second.
okay, Vanderbrink second. You got the assist on that one. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All opposed, nay. Resolution to adopt the Capital Projects Fund for 2021.
So move, Vandenbrink.
Okay, we got a motion by Vanderbrink. Is there a second?
Second, Stiglmeyer.
A second by Sigelmeyer. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Resolution to amend our 2020 Enterprise Fund budget.
So moved, Albie.
Okay, motion by Albie. Is there a second?
Second, Chandler Henry.
A second by Chandler Henry. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 All
Aye.
opposed? Nay? Okay, resolution to adopt our 2021 Enterprise Fund budget.
So moved.
Motion by Catlin,
Second, Albie.
Second, Hazard.
second by Alvey. You got the assist, okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. And then resolution to appropriate sums of money. This is a pretty big one here this time. A lot larger than we've had in the past. We're appropriating from the general fund $12,749,570, and from the capital projects fund $3,839,690. We have a motion for that.
So moved.
Vandenbrink, I'll make it.
Okay, motion by Vanderbrink,
Second,
second
Stiglmeyer.
by Stegelmeyer. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. And resolution to appropriate sums of money for the enterprise. We are proposing to appropriate for the enterprise $7,026,414.
So moved.
So motion by Catlin.
Second.
Who was this?
Crampy.
Crampy? I think Crampy was the one that got the second on that, okay? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, all opposed, nay. Okay, we have run through all of our resolutions. We are moving along now to the review and acceptance of the treasurer's reports, check registers, and draft financial statements for June through September of 2020. It was in your packet. Any questions on that? We have a motion to accept the treasurer's reports and check registers.
Move to approve.
Motion by Whitmore, second.
Second, Richard.
Who got the second first there? Aquafresca, I think. I think your light went on first. Second by Aquafresca. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? All opposed, nay? Okay, now we got a big presentation by Mr. Mueller on where we're going from here.
Okay.
What are you gonna do with this, all of this newfound wealth you have, Mr. Mueller, to better
Well,
Colorado?
President Mayor, we're going to do exactly what we told the taxpayers that we were going to do. So, and I hopefully you were able to find some time since Monday evening to look through the memo that I sent out.
Yep.
The intent, so today what I wanted to do is lay out the proposal that I'm suggesting in terms of the framework as to how we analyze requests for partnership assistance, and recognizing that it's going to be a living document. We're going to learn as we go through this process. So this is from my perspective, a starting point. My purpose of presenting this here to you today is to get your thoughts on these elements that are in the plan and any additional elements you believe need to be in that framework, with the idea that if you desire, I can bring this back and have it confirmed by the board, or revised and then confirmed by the board in January. I will tell you that it is our hope to have projects to bring to you for funding in January, so that we can get moving. You know, I think what I've tried to do here is balance our, well, number one, and I think the most important, is to make sure that we memorialize within this program our commitments that we made to the voters with respect to how we're going to spend the money. And so I know that this board knows well what you voted on and created in July. I know that I'm very well versed in it and understand it. Our staff understands it, but I think it's really critical going forward that future board members, future staff members, members of the public can turn to a document and find what it is we've committed to and what are the guiding principles of our program, that history behind it, so that it's understood 10, 20 years from now why money is allocated in the way it is. And we institutionalize that distribution of funds in the way that we represent it to the voters. It's really critical to me. And you know, to the extent that there was criticism of 7A as we went through the public process, what I heard, you know, among those criticisms were our potential lack of accountability of how we're going to spend the money. Well, I disagree with that lack of accountability. I really think it's incumbent upon the board and the staff to make sure that we are very transparent and track in a very public manner how we're spending and utilizing these funds, and be able at any point in time to show how it's consistent with 7A and the representations made not only in the question itself, but in the implementation plan that you adopted as part of Resolution 2020-01. So that's why there's that long-winded introductory section in that framework. I believe that it captures the very important elements of 7A. But before I move from that framework, you know, that introductory section, I did want to just make sure everybody sees that we've incorporated the equal over time concept with respect to the 5 categories of funding monies. We've incorporated the geographic equity language. We've incorporated the language that says there will be no funding from this initiative used to permanently or temporarily fallow agriculture. And it talks specifically about where how we're going to distribute the money. I think it's really critical to again just represent and make sure the voters are aware of that. I included the language of 7A because so many times, frankly, you see voters pass a ballot question and then no one can ever go back and find the language of the ballot question. And I just want to make sure this is up in front of everybody all the time so that I and others remember what it is we told the voters we would do. And that's really why that section is there. I feel like we're, with that introductory and then with the more detailed definitions contained within the document itself, within the framework, it was my goal to be very consistent with our expressions of intent. Obviously, it's most important that this board feels that way. I think so. So what I'm proposing is a rolling grant. Well, it's not a grant, rolling request program, where at your regular quarterly meetings, or should you choose to call a special meeting to consider a funding project, at any one of those, you'll be able to consider funding requests. And what we've asked in terms of timing and process is that anyone interested in those funds will be, first of all, let me say this, provided we get a consensus on what this document and this framework looks like, we'll create from that, the staff will create an application and a staff evaluation of applications, those two forms. So hopefully forms that will work very quickly and easily for both the applicant and the staff, but that will require applicants to provide really detailed information so that our staff has it. Once they have a complete application, they have all the information the staff needs. We're representing to the public that we will process that and have it on a board agenda within 6 weeks. If it's submitted 6 weeks before the next board meeting, unless there's some emergency or some issue that the board can't fit it on their agenda. So the board still retains discretion not to do that within 6 weeks, but that's our commitment to try to do that in that area or in time frame. Again, though, it's a rolling commitment by the board. So every year we'll have roughly 4.2 million that the board will have authority to distribute. And you can kind of picture where once this program's up and running, we might expect a front loading of requests in a January board meeting, followed by subsequent requests in additional months. But we didn't want to set it up, at least initially, as a hard one-time annual application process, because we recognize that things happen in people's businesses and ditches and just water users in general. Things are happening all year round, and so trying to be flexible is key. And really, what I guess underlying this whole thing is a desire by myself to have a framework, but also be able to be very responsive to our water users and our communities, and not create such a bureaucratic process that we end up competing with divisions of the federal government for how long it takes to apply for and then finally receive funds, right? We want to be nimble and efficient. We've got a small staff. We need to be nimble and efficient. I think we have a history of doing that very well. I think it's going to require a lot of focus and kind of efficiency efforts by our staff, but I'm really convinced that we can do that. It is really, from my perspective, an exciting opportunity. So, essentially, what are we looking for as a staff before we recommend something to you? And I think that's really critical. Does it align with our mission at the River District? That's the most basic question, right? It's our mission is our mission statement, our strategic plan, and frankly, the ballot language of 7A, right? So that's something that's every one of these recommendations the staff has to be able to answer. Is it in compliance with any policies that this board has? As you know, the board has roughly, I want to say 15 or 16 policies. I want to make sure that we never are recommending something to you that is contrary to one of your policies. So whatever those policies may be on the day that we bring it in, I think that's important. The next is this category allocation. We have the 5 categories. I've included the more expansive definitions from the implementation plan in those category definitions. And so they're there. We we will, what I've asked of our accounting staff is to make sure that we track the distribution to, between those funds. And so there's you know, there's going to have to be, so this is where I got a little bit more specific, I think, than the implementation plan or question 7A, is that I am suggesting to the board that the way to make sure we're giving funds to these buckets in approximately equal amounts over time, tracking that on a running 5-year average. So it's not every year does it have to be exactly or approximately equal, but over any given 5-year running average, it should be equal. And so that's what we're trying to do, and recognizing that there may be periods of time where one or other of those categories needs a significant amount more funding. So maintaining some flexibility, but also keeping true to our commitment to distribute that 5-year running average makes sense. I guess I would throw out as a question, I want to stop here. We could do 5-year running average. We could also do a different period of time on a running average. I honestly considered a 10-year running average, but it seemed like that might be too long. So I wanted to get the board's take on that concept, because that was not in your implementation plan.
I guess from my first blush, you can hide too much on a 10-year running average. I think a 5-year in terms of transparency, and granted, this is going to be, we're at the very beginning of this this marathon, and you'll see how it works out. But I think to start off with a 5-year is good target for, because it's going to take 5 years to get to that anyways.
Andy, I would love to see an annual report that shows distribution by the 5 categories and geographical distribution, and then that 5-year rolling average. And I mean, it could be in 5 years that Eagle County has gotten 0, but there may be a good reason for that. So it still can be over time. We don't have a hard and fast 5-year rule, but I think looking at it annually and then looking at that rolling average of 5 years as we gain years on our belt will be really critical for the board to keep plugged in on how that's looking.
Director Chandler Henry, I agree completely. And I will say what I'm recommending is that the staff, anytime we present a recommendation to you, we actually give you the current year running average and the 5-year running average, so that you can see how our recommendations will impact that. And
great.
It's just I want you to have real-time data on that throughout the year. I absolutely anticipate having an annual report that contains those summaries as well, not just for you, but I suspect there will be members of the public and the press who will want to see that as well. So
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the board at this point?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Many project proposals are going to fall into 1 or 2 or more of these categories. I think that's indicated here in the narrative. How will that be appropriated out to the different categories? Say, an agricultural project is 70% infrastructure, but it has a 20% healthy rivers component and a 10% conservation component, just as an example.
And Director Acrofresco, I think that's a great question. And in section 2A, I briefly touch on that. Staff will have an obligation to provide to you the breakdown on a multi-category project in an allocation and articulate the basis for that allocation. So we'll also, just to be clear, we're going to ask the applicant to allocate that and explain it. Staff is going to critique their suggestions so that we can make sure they're not gaming our bucket system. But you'll have the articulated rationale from the staff on each of these as to why that distribution is what it is. I would tell you that it's not going to be a perfect science, but it's something that we just have to have to kind of learn as we go on that. But that is, our intent is to make sure we're hitting those points every time.
Yeah, it's going to be somewhat subjective, but
Right.
I suppose we can ask the applicant to come before the board and make their case.
So this is Munger. I had one question, and Andy, you did a great job on this draft. I'm pulling this together and kind of putting our thoughts down on paper and some achievable stuff. My question to us, and this is the work of art as well as science, and then how often, whether it's every year or every other year, that the board kind of reviews our direction here, and kind of thinking that in line too, because this is new things, new money and the rest, and what we decide today. So I guess want to keep it on our radar screen that we probably ought to evaluate this on some period basis.
Yeah.
And Director Monger, I would agree with you completely that the board will want to come back to this framework and tweak it. We saw that with our much grant program. I think on something this significant, I think what you're going to get is not only board members suggesting revisions and changes, but staff coming in and saying, hey, we'd like to tweak this. Again, that's part of why I have the intro paragraphs, is because whatever changes we make need to remain consistent with our commitments. But in terms of the process and how it works, I think we're going to learn a lot, and that what we learn needs to be incorporated into the framework as we go. Whether it's annual or biannual or whether you want ad hoc changes, I think it'd probably be good not to do it on an ad hoc, every quarter. I would hate to revisit this document, but certainly once a year seems to me to be totally appropriate. And at the beginning, it may be quarterly, because you may say, wow, this request came out of nowhere. We didn't even anticipate that kind of thing. How does that work? So.
Other comments as we go along.
I have another question.
Is Whitmore first? Yep. You muted it, Marty. Marty, you muted. Yep. Marty.
Yep, there we go.
There you go. Okay, good. Yep.
Andy, I think you really did a great job of outlining a very reasonable, rational process. I like the criteria. I mean, I think it's a good one. I just want to raise, you also, as part of that, have asked for what I would just call confirmation of the ability of the general manager to do small projects. So up to 25,000, you already have had that authority. I would like to see us leave that in there. I think you've articulated it well. You'd still report it, but that way, if there is, something, a ditch company has an immediate problem and it's in between board meetings, I mean, that also gives you the ability to handle it. It also keeps us focused, hopefully, on big projects, still being able to review the ones that you've approved. And so, I'm frankly very supportive of the entire plan as you have outlined it in your memo.
Yeah, and Steve, before I call on you on this, I'd like to make a further comment on that. Frankly, I think that it should be increased to 50,000. I think that we have quite a criteria laid out here. And if the board is going to get too down in the weeds on all of these, we're never going to be able to get through what we need to do as a board. I think and I think that 50,000 may be an appropriate level. I'd like to hear other input from that. We've got a very defined criteria here, and we've got a lot of money that is expended for these partnership projects. This is far more than the district could ever have hoped to get out of the sports gambling for the state water plan, and it may be even more than the state will end up getting out of the sports betting for the near future. So, I commend the the district staff and board on getting this passed. You know, I'd like to hear other comments on that 50,000. Mr. Acrafresca, you're next, and then Ms. Chandler Henry.
First, I'd like to respond to your question about 50,000. I could support that, you know, given the high cost of projects these days. 50,000 may not be as much as it sounds like, but I would like to have a cumulative cap on that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's appropriate, whether it should be 400,000 cumulative cap, 300,000. I'm open to that, but there should be a cap.
Yeah.
My question was in regards to when the River District is approached by a very large scale project, a large scale project that can benefit many counties, certainly more than one county, and a large scale project that may require accumulating funds through more than one budget cycle to be able to participate. What's the sense of the board on accumulating dollars in a fund for a certain large project that would be a bigger investment than just annual requests?
Any thoughts on that before we go to Ms. Chandler Henry and then Mr. Albion? Their comments? Any thoughts on having a certain amount set aside for big chunks? Granted, everything we're going to have right now, because it's a big chunk compared to what we're doing. Mr. Gray?
I like that idea.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, Director Acrafresca, that's a great question, and I would just tag on to it. Are we going to consider multi-year projects? And if so, would those be multi-year commitments of future revenue, or would they be multi-year project out of that year's revenue? I think there's a little bit of in the weeds stuff there, but it's to keep the proportionality reportable in a 5-year running average. It kind of needs to be addressed, I think.
Mhm.
And if I may, I do like the idea of having the ability to fund larger projects. Many of them, as Director Gray, I think, is pointing out, are something that happens over multiple years. I think the board could potentially indicate its intent to allocate money in future years. I believe our legal counsel will chime in and say that we need to make sure that it is subject to annual appropriation by the board in the year in which it will be expended. But that's, it could be done, I believe, from my perspective, but Peter is probably better at answering that.
No, I mean, obviously that's right. You know, the other way to do this, though, is to just do it in the reverse. Is that you have the 5-year running average for a reason, and you fund to, maybe just hypothetically in 1 year, all of the funds go to one project and in one basin, obviously. And over the next 4 or 5 years, that basin, sort of made the decision not to accept any other funds. So there are ways to do that and get larger amounts in, even 100% of the funds here may not be sufficient for some very big, large projects, but then I think, you're talking about a different scale at that point.
Any more thoughts on this before we move on?
Well, let me use as an example getting permanency on the Shoshone water right. If just say, for example, all of our partners come in with contributions, but it's going to require the River District to put up $7 or $8 million, for example. These are just hypotheticals that I'm throwing out. I would hope that we would have a mechanism to meet that need.
And I think we will, Director Acrafresca, for those types of projects that merit it. There are a number of ways we can work with that within the framework of this program, I believe. So
good.
I think your comments are worthwhile, and I'll take this as direction and try to make sure I can build that in as a concept into the document.
Okay, Ms. Chandler Henry.
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to echo Marty's comments. I think this is a really good document for us, and I really appreciate all the work that's in it. I think considering going up to 50,000 is something to consider. And along those lines, I wonder if we need to build in an appeals process. I know for most things that have an administrative approval ability, there's also the chance for an applicant to appeal to the elected board. So I don't know if that gets too cumbersome, but that may be something that we think about as we move forward.
I get, that's a good point, yeah. Mr. Alvey, you had a comment, I believe.
Yeah, kind of follows along with what Director Aquafresca has been saying. And I just hope that we can retain as much flexibility as possible in awarding these grants, particularly in the case where we get out of balance on the 5-year average for one type of project over another. There may very well be good reasons to do that. And I don't think we want to tie our hands too tightly to say, oh gosh, we're $1 million behind in infrastructure. We need to find a project. So I think it's important that we keep the flexibility to reward good projects.
Yeah, good point. Ms. Stegelmeier.
I'm just wondering, do we need to have a motion to go up to the 50,000?
I think it might be good, yeah.
If I can, my thought would be if that's the general consensus of the board, I can put that in, revise this whole framework, and I'd love the board to adopt the framework in January. So this is
yeah.
draft.
That would be good, yeah.
I really want your direction, and Karin, I really appreciate that, because I think whatever you guys think is appropriate, it's your discretion to delegate, not mine. So whatever that is, I do want to echo, Director Aquafresca. I would love not only direction on the size of the project, so if it's $50,000, then the annual cap of expenditure should also be identified, just so that everybody knows what that is. And I think an appeal process, let me just echoing Director Chandler Henry's, I think that it's appropriate to have an appeal process from something that I declined to fund. That would also be, remember, unless you direct us otherwise, I'm only going to be bringing to you staff recommendations, which means there are projects that we're going to not be recommending for funding. I can, we can provide a summary of those in a memo, but I'm trying to think about how we can run this efficiently at a board meeting and not add an extra day of time to the board meeting. So if we're declining to recommend to the board funding a project, I think if you wanted, we could also have that appeal process available to those unsuccessful applicants. So, and frankly, it could be an appeal as of right, or it could be a discretionary appeal, meaning that the board, the executive committee of the board could say, gee, we've received this appeal and we're going to put it on the next quarterly meeting of the board so that we can consider it. But or the executive committee of the board could say, yeah, we're not really interested in that appeal. We're going to deny it, and not put it on we're going to uphold the decision of staff.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you, but I'm trying to think of ways to streamline this.
Yeah, Ms. Whitmore.
I think we stick with kind of a basic plan, and then we're going to have to tweak this as we get some experience with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we set it up in a reasonable way. I agree with Director Alvey. I think we don't want to get so picky-uni in our, how things are divided up, or our criteria, or how we do things, that we don't have some flexibility. I think Director Aquafresca has raised some really good points along those lines as well. But I think what you've proposed in the way of a base plan makes a lot of sense. Change the discretionary amount, bring it back in January. But I think then, we're going to need a couple of quarters, 2 or 3. Next year at this time, we kind of look back and maybe at that point, we're ready to tweak it again, just to take into account our experience.
Good point. And I might mention one thing, what the Garfield County Commissioners do on their Human Resources grant, they have a certain set aside each year, and they have 4 review cycles on that throughout the year, and they target for about 25% of the monies that they have available to be distributed at each review cycle. And, you know, it can be from, it might be 20% at one time and 30% another one, but so that you don't end up everybody front loading the January one for fear that, you know, if they don't get it in now, they won't have a chance in April. And if we just kind of target and let folks know that, you know, it's going to be available throughout the year. We don't have a rush to the bar. Other comments and thoughts when we go along on this?
I have one,
Yeah,
David.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to echo what folks have been telling you, Andy. This makes sense. It looks like it's something that our constituents will be able to understand, that they can make the application without having to hire a grant writer, which is a big deal with me. You know, I'd rather put the money into the ground than I would into a grant writer's pocket. We've seen some of those applications that have come from, you know, that are way too slick coming from that group of people. You know, I mean, hell, I've written grant applications that look terrible. But I think one of the other things is I like the idea of us being quick enough and nimble enough that if there is a slide on the side of a hill someplace that washes a ditch out, that we can be the people that come to it the most rapid, so that they're not having to go to a commercial lender, borrowing the money, and then we come and write out and pay the loan off and those kind of things. I think it makes more sense for us. And this may be where it gets down to our constituents the quickest, is that they recognize they voted for this money to be in the community and to be on the Western Slope. And that if a $50,000 project shows up and they have no place to go, that we are the place to come to begin with. You know, I like the idea of being able to finance larger projects, but every one of these projects is going to be a multi-year, it looks like. Just look at the water users. We've been piping ditch for years and years and years. But one of the things that we have to do is we write an application each year for new grants. And I think those kind of folks should be writing an application for that bridge money or for the money to help buy down on some of those projects. And when we start looking at that, really what we're looking at is not so much money that we've put into the district, but how much money we've leveraged into the district. And that's something we ought to be taking a look at too, is how does these funds help with leverage on some of these projects that we're having to compete nationwide, or, you know, at least westward. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's not to tweak or anything like that. It's just from being out there on the ground and, you know, having some grant applications I wrote myself, that we were, you know, $65,000, $75,000 short of being able to buy down to where the salt we were removing from the Colorado River system, we didn't get the bid. And if we'd have had somebody like the River District, because, you know, you've done that for us. You played banker for us. Chris Trees helped us get into that. And, you know, that's still out there. Those kind of funds are still going to be available. And I think if we can help our communities with that, this money could be incredibly important.
Well, and Mr. Catlin, or Director Catlin, I totally agree. And I'm hoping I covered that in subsection 3, where I talk about analysis of project funding and leverage of River District funds. And I want to just talk a little bit about that. So I really spent a little bit of ink on that, saying, look, it's our intent that the applicants are going to use our funds to attract additional funding. It's absolutely important to us that we see that. We're willing to award it on a contingent basis, that we'll award it as long as they go out and get that additional matching. So we're the money up front, or the commitment up front, so they can get federal or other dollars into the project. You know, that's that's really my intent with that. We also, I do want to mention that last paragraph of 3. It's a little bit different than I think a lot of government grant programs, and it's why I never really consider this a grant program. The funding could be in the form of a grant, or it may be that our district chooses to invest in a project. And the instance where that may show up is that, and I cover this a little bit, but I really do want to make sure everybody sees that and understands it. And if you have objections to it, I need to hear about it. So, you know, an applicant in a theoretical project is going to have a stream. Say they're, I don't know, building a hydro plant, and it's an important one from, say, a water supply perspective, and those and it meets our goals in a number of ways because the way it helps bring water down the river for all sorts of purposes. But let's say the applicant on that or proponent on that has a for-profit entity that is providing funds and getting some return on the project. I think at that point, it would be very difficult for me to recommend that we grant taxpayer dollars to an operation where someone else is making a return or has the opportunity to make a return. And so what I'd really like is the authority from the board to say, look, we're not going to walk away from projects that are really important to our constituents and that are really important to meeting our strategic goals as the West Slope. But in situations like that, we're going to take taxpayer dollars and we're going to invest them in that project on the same terms and conditions that they're invested by the private entity, absent a few key things like mandatory multi-year fiscal obligations and things like that. But that, you know, if they end up with a 1% return on investment, I want to see our taxpayers get that, and I want to see that money reinvested back into our partnership project funds. And I think we owe that to our taxpayers, and that's why I recommended it. You know, there are other projects that no one's going to be making any money on, and that is clear that it's a grant situation. But where it's an investment, I want to make it an investment. So I would welcome the comments.
Well, I like that a lot. I think that's absolutely appropriate and is just good business. You know, another opportunity to parlay our limited funds, and our funds still have a limit to them, of course, would be to consider loans for an organization that does have a revenue stream, but it's more of a trickle, but they would qualify to repay the River District's contribution. I don't think that I saw anything in the narrative about looking for opportunities to loan money to complete projects that meet all of our other criteria, and thereby recovering those dollars and be able to get them out into the communities again and again.
Yeah, a no interest subordinate loan might be just, you know, what one entity needs to put it over the top on getting a project done.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I think that's I can certainly add that as a possibility in terms of how we might, a third possibility as to how we might enter into some form of partnership. So,
is there, this quick question, is there any problem with Tabor on any of those things of us loaning money, you know, making a return on it, some of those kind of things?
I don't think there would be.
Okay.
Alan, I'd have to look into it a little bit more. I don't know off the top of my head, but it was puzzling about it as you were asking the question.
the return that the multi-year loan we would want to look at, I think the return on an investment, it would have caused us problems before November 3rd because it would have bumped up against.
It raised alarms there. I don't know.
Not sure who that was, but I muted him.
Anyway, I think that it would have bumped up against our revenue cap, but as we're now debruced, we're as a district, we're doing just fine on that. But we'll look at the loan issue before we ever do anything.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, right now, with the best we could hope for probably is a return of investment rather than return on investment. Ian just gave us a report to Kobe, but what we're getting on interest rates, which doesn't buy a cup of coffee.
Yeah, that's a rough one. The only other, I do want to draw attention to just a couple things. One is the local community support issue.
Yeah, good one.
That again echoes your commitment that we'll consult with local governments. We're asking the applicants to do that to the extent the applicant can't come with a letter of support from their local county commission. And our staff will be charged with contacting the local government to find out what's going on there. You know, there are cases where they may not have the support of the county and we still may bring it forward. But if we do that, we want the county to know ahead of time that we're doing that. I don't have any desire to have get crosswise with any of our constituent county governments, but I think it's recognizing that sometimes our priorities are important to our water users and may not be as well understood or supported by some county commissioners. Other part of this is that, you know, this is primarily a financial partnership program. We have to recognize, as has always been the case, oftentimes when the River District is brought in as a partner to something or creates a partnership, we end up with human resource requirements. I mean, any one of these financial transactions is going to add to our staffing obligations, our workload. But I think we can handle that. It's the ones that, hey, not only do we want your money, but we want your engineering expertise, or we want your government affairs expertise, or your legal expertise on these issues. And so that's got to be part of our analysis as a staff to make sure that we have the capacity to handle what we're taking on, and also that that we when we take something on, we really know we can succeed in providing that capacity. So that's in there, and it's nothing new. You've heard me talk about insisting on having that analysis done in the past anyway. Risk analysis is something that just, you know, making sure we understand what's going on from a risk perspective if we're helping to fund something. Really, again, frankly, important to me and should be to everybody on this call. So other than I think the one thing I would look for direction on, and you've talked quite a bit about it, I'm hearing $50,000 limitation on general manager discretion on just this partnership project funding. I had suggested an annual cap of $250,000 under the $25,000 limit, but I'd look to you for direction on that annual cap amount so I can incorporate that. But
I would toss out to start either 10% of the expected revenue stream, which would be about, you know, 400,000, or just a simple 500,000, you know, on that. You know, keep in mind that we'll be getting a report from you anyways on a quarterly basis. That's what this would be. Ms. Whitmore?
I'd probably suggest the 400 cap.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's reasonable. That's 825s or
no, 850s.
850s.
850, sorry.
You're a lawyer, not an attorney.
1625s. I know. Math's not my strong point.
Any other thoughts
Because
on
not every one of them will be 50,000. Some of them could be 15. Some might be 5. Some might be 25. Some will be 50, 35. I think 400 is a good number. 10% essentially.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts of the board on that?
I'm fine with those figures.
Yeah. Ms. Stegemeyer?
I was just doing a thumbs up. I agree.
Okay, yep. Thank you.
Mr. President.
You know, that's one of those numbers that may end up needing tweaked.
Yeah, we'll see
They
how it
start
goes.
out with something like what Andy's talking about, 250,000. If the demand is there, then we can tweak it. to just come out and say, well, we're gonna give this young man $400,000 to play with. There might be some of those no votes that are concerned about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
We-
you know,
we
it's
understand-
something- I like the idea of 10%, but I really, what I would like to say is whatever Andy thinks he would be comfortable with, rather than loading that office too heavily, is that, you know, that could be something at a board meeting, you can say, look, the demand on this is incredible. I need some help. Or we find out that that's, you know, gonna be a good number. Just a thought about maybe moving slowly as we go through this, because none of us know what it's gonna look like. It looks really good from this side of the deal. So just a thought.
When you put it in perspective, we've got we're adopting a annual budget in excess of $9 million. And, you know, Andy is going to be, and the staff will be hard pressed to, you know, assure the allocation of these funds in a responsible and efficient fashion. So anything we can do to help that along would be good.
Yep. I got a lot of faith in those people.
Mr. Alvey, any comments or no?
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I understand we're not, the board it's not proposed to take a vote on this today. You're just providing direction. And I think that's great. And I think I certainly don't have any argument with the direction on the delegation of authority that would come in for approval in January for the general manager on these program matters. I don't want to delay things at all, but I wonder if it would be appropriate for staff to take back amongst themselves and come back at the same time in January and report on the general manager's existing delegation and perhaps make any recommendations on that. If you recall, the general manager has delegation to expend up to $25,000 either in an original contract or an extending an existing contract that the board has already approved for policy implementation matters to implement the River District's policies. There is no cap on those on that authority other than the approved budget. And I'm not suggesting that there should be a cap. We certainly don't run into a big problem on that. But my thought is that I do not believe that $25,000 delegation has been increased in at least 18 years. And I just wonder whether it's appropriate for us at the staff level to think about if it makes sense to talk that through and come to the board with a recommendation on that as well.
Yeah, that'd be that's a good point. Yeah, we should bring that forward in January also. As far as I'm concerned, you can bring anything forward in January. But no, that's a very good point, Mr. Fleming. Thank you. Yep. Any other comments from the board on this?
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to follow up on Andy's remarks about local community support. He indicated that staff might be available to work out any problems with the Board of County Commissioners, for example. I wanted to make it clear that we always want to involve the district or the county director from that county in those kinds of discussions, because that can be kind of sensitive, and the director might be in a really good position to help the applicant and local governments work that out. And then under the heading of human resource requirements, I think we'll probably have a lot of demand, especially from smaller size entities. We'll have a lot of demand for grantsmanship. I know that we have more than one employee that has grant application skills. We might consider identifying an employee that has really good grantsmanship skills and make sure that they're well equipped to assist applicants that could really benefit from that kind of help. I think there's going to be a lot of demand for that. Also, I wanted to raise a couple other questions here. The River District has a long tradition of prioritizing protections for pre-compact water rights. I know that was a part of the River District's old grants program, and I did not see any mention in the narrative about prioritization of pre-compact water rights, but I'd like to ask the board to think about that and follow up in a future conversation, or be prepared to discuss that in January. And then one final question I had. There may be some really good opportunities over the years to assist researchers. You know, I think that the water community here in the River District has benefited by some of the Colorado State University research projects. And I wanted to know how a proposal for a relevant, meaningful research project might approach the River District for support, particularly with accredited universities or colleges that are engaged in relevant research. How would those requests fit in? How would those be managed?
If I can, I would say, at least from my perspective, unless the board directs otherwise, I think that it would, if a local sponsor, whether it's a local government or a ditch company or a group of water users who are participating in a research project or coming to us asking for funding on those research projects, that would be appropriate. Now, if it were a scholar from the University of Utah on their own coming to us from, I would say we probably wouldn't consider that very favorably, right?
Or University of Arizona, and how they get management.
Right, Cal Berkeley, no. So it's just, you know, if our water users are engaged in that and that's something they need to have better understanding of optimization of their agricultural operations or their water use, and we believe that it's consistent with our mission, I think that that's an appropriate project to fund. But it would go through the same analysis as these others.
Good, thank you. Any thoughts on the issue of pre-compact water rights from staff or board members?
Marty, Ms. Whitmore?
I think pre-compact water rights are important, but Steve, I think there are also projects that are new water that are just as important. And back to sort of the research question, I guess I think what we told the public was that this money was going to be spent on projects, on efficiency projects, on, you know, new projects, on whatever. I wouldn't say never on a research project. There could be circumstances where it makes sense, but I don't think I want to see us just funding basic university research. They've got so many other resources for funding, whereas water projects do not.
Absolutely. You know, research projects can be a bottomless pit. But, you know, I could cite a couple of research projects that really pertain to demand management, for example. So I guess our responsibility would just be to scrutinize those proposals very carefully.
Yeah. It may be a possibility for general fund money or something else on that as we go forward, just as we fund the USGS, the general fund on an annual basis.
Mr. Chairman, this is Trampy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yep.
You know, I've been sitting here keeping my mouth shut most of the afternoon, and I finally got to say something.
Okay, good.
in listening to all of this, I don't disagree with a lot of it, but I'm just sitting here trying to analyze what I was hearing. And what I'm hearing is that we're just going to be the maintenance pool of money for infrastructure, or we're going to be the pool of money to put the water back in the stream. And I hope that that's not the case. I hope that we're more than putting head gates in and putting measuring devices in ditches and those kinds of things. I hope we can steer clear of that, because there's a lot of us out here that have had to fund those kinds of things on our own for years and years and years. And I know what our past grant program has been, and I know what the Upper Gunnison grant program is, and I'm not comfortable with that kind of a situation. And I know I'm going out, and I don't mean this to be the last hurrah for Trampy by any stretch of the imagination, but I hope that we can put this money not only to major infrastructure improvements and upgrades, but I hope we can also put some of this money to things that are going to provide some structure and some protection for the future. And I think we have to have research going there. I mean, we can't just throw money at sprinklers for mountain country. We can't just throw money at some wild idea. We're going to have to put some small amounts of money and work up the line with information to get where we need to get to provide some protection for these high mountain meadow irrigators in the future. And I'm not sure just exactly how that's going to happen, but we're going to have to be careful and not throw money away at it. But we've got enough money that we can do some of those kinds of things. But I can tell you from my own personal experience that it's very, very hard for me to go out and find other sources of money to help me figure these things out here in my basin, because they figure I'm a lost cause. Recreation and tourism are the economic drivers of my kind of country, and I don't totally agree with that philosophy. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from, okay?
So let me see if I can paraphrase. You think possibly, like with Mr. Aquafresca, that we should set aside some portion of this for, competitive research grants or something?
Well, I don't know if we can say you got to set so much apart, but I think it comes when you get projects that come to you, you have to be very, very thoughtful in your process of how you accept or reject them. And you can throw a lot of money after a project and after a project that are all going to be basically doing the same thing, efficiency. And I'm not sure efficiency is the total answer. Maybe I'm going to go way out there, but maybe we need to throw money at some kind of an agronomic analysis of varieties of grass or alfalfa or something that can survive on less water.
Okay.
That wouldn't be just a demand management question. That would be a climate change question as much as anything. So I can get you way out there, guys. I've thought about lots of things over the years, and every time I mentioned something, I got thrown down on it because it always costs too much money, or you're just only one that might be interested. Well, maybe I am the only one that might be interested, but if I'm interested and I'm successful, more than likely it's going to be added to from somebody else. So I think we have to think all of those things through.
Well, over the years, you and Mr. Munger in particular have, held our feet to the fire on the issue of is better efficiency always a better way to go? And appreciate the thought that you brought to that. So, yes. Ms. Stegelmeier.
Yeah, I want to concur in that. I think I'm just thinking of projects in Summit County where multiple entities are paying for some research and monitoring projects that are really important to look at phosphorus and nitrogen and how we can deal with that. And temperatures, not as much in Summit County, but in so many places with temperatures going up, what that's doing to the fish population. I think the monitoring and research should be evaluated and considered on an equal basis.
Yeah. Well, we do need, some sort of assistance in the direction, but we also need to make sure we stay true to the promises we gave the voters with this. So it's going to be a fine line to walk as we go down the road, and one for the board and the staff to really keep their eyes on. More
When I
comments?
use the
on
word
this?
project, I don't necessarily see infrastructure. I see research as a project.
Yeah. More thoughts as we go forward? Well, I guess, Mr. Mueller, you have your direction to, there's a few tweaks that need to make to this. Bring it back to the board at the January 19th board meeting and discuss it.
Great, and I will do that. I will certainly not exercise any potential discretionary authority I have until you grant it to me. We may, in fact, bring some projects to you in January. You'd have to approve the rubric for the framework first, and then take our recommendations. But we have a couple, at least a couple that are lining up, oddly enough, already. So pretty excited about it, and I think you'll be excited by what we're seeing. And I really do think this is an opportunity for us to accomplish all those goals that we've had for decades at the River District, and bring some real on the ground efforts to complete real projects. And I would just say, I think there are elements of everything that Director Trampy and Director Stegemeyer are looking for in the definitions that are within those buckets. I mean, that's, so we can, where it's appropriate and where it fits in those definitions to further those goals that we have, they're there. And I think that it'll be up to you to decide that, but that's a really important aspect of, technological or technical innovation or assistance in ag often depends on new science techniques, new agronomic techniques, and all those kind of things. I think we've really got to look at as we move forward in a what looks to be a very much drier future. So, thank you. I really appreciate everybody's comments and your engagement on this. I feel like this really helps me understand what you're looking for. So really appreciate it, and looking forward to it. I will tell you, we hope to be advertising for that project partnership manager here before the end of the year, with the anticipation that that person would be hired sometime late January or so. So it's unlikely they'll be on board by the January board meeting, but hopefully pretty quickly. If you happen to know anybody who's really competent projects manager, someone who's got some technical background to evaluate things, and someone who's got some financial reporting background to go with that, send them our way. So really very excited about it. So.
Okay, well, thank you. Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to keep this short. I'm going to ask Jason to provide a brief update on the Ramshorn Reservoir application, where we're co-applicants with Erie County Water Users, Tri-County Water Conservancy District. Before I do that, Andy gave thanks to a lot of folks at the beginning of this presentation on the successful passage of 7A. I'm sure I speak for everybody else here who says, it wouldn't have happened without Andy and his cheerleading. And so I think we all owe Andy a big round of applause, or a beer, or something at some point in time. So, yeah, thanks, Andy.
Good job, Andy. Okay, Jason.
Thanks. Yes, as Peter noted, you authorized us to realign as a co-applicant for the Ramshorn Reservoir and in the Ramshorn Reservoir and Pipeline case. And that application will add a number of junior uses to the already conditional Ramshorn Reservoir water right. Among those uses include augmentation, as well as stream flow enhancement for aquatic habitat. The purpose of the project, you've got the Ramshorn Reservoir component. You also have a pipeline which would take water from Cow Creek and deliver it over to Ridgway Reservoir. And the primary purpose of the project is to provide additional water supplies for water users within Uray County. The primary way that this will be accomplished is by satisfying the call downstream, which is the M&D Canal, Uncompahgre water users M&D Canal. Recently, we've been meeting with a number of the objectors, and we've also come to the conclusion that we should probably make an amendment to the application to make abundantly clear the storage aspect in Ridgway Reservoir of the application, as well as to include some additional exchanges up Dallas Creek. So this is just an update, but we do plan to try to file that amendment by the end of December. And with that, if anyone has any questions, be happy to answer.
Any questions?
And I would just say that, those amendments are consistent in concert with the existing application. They're more in the nature of clarifications than a big, huge change.
Okay. No action needed on that, correct?
Yep. That was the only sort of a primary update issue that I had. But if there are questions, I'm happy to answer anything.
I don't think so. Anything else, Mr. Fleming, or?
No, thank you.
I guess in closing here, before we adjourn, number one, I'd like to mention it's been a difficult, trying year for board and staff. We haven't had a chance to meet in person since last January, and I think the staff has really stepped up in responding to that and being able to keep us all together and moving along as well as we have. And the board has done a great job in participating via Zoom. And I appreciate everybody's willingness to sit through very long Zoom meetings that we've had and stay involved as a board. And I think the fact that we passed this legislation, our ballot issue, is testament to that. We do have some both board and staff that will not be here at the January, which will be a Zoom meeting. I see no reason to expect that January, maybe even April, will not be Zoom. So unfortunately, I know I hate it, but Mr. Mueller, do you want to make any comments about the staff or give them a chance to say goodbye that will not be here come January meeting?
Sure, I do. I appreciate that very much. I do want to say, as I think everybody's aware, we're actually losing 3 of our longstanding employees to retirement. Longest standing one is Ray Tenney, retiring. He's been instrumental in the district's efforts for 3 decades now and has really done an amazing job here at the district. He'll be last day in the office is middle of December, and he's really going to be very hard to replace. He's got an institutional knowledge that is truly amazing. And we're also losing Jim Pokrant, Director of Communications, after 50 years, I believe, of working here at the district. Jim is retiring to be a lift op. So now why one would do that, I don't know, but he is. And I think it's a lack of oxygen in Leadville that causes one to want to be a lift op. So and then we also have John Courier, our chief engineer, who's just celebrated his 10th year anniversary here at the district, retiring. I think Jim and Ray, last I checked, were both on. certainly if I welcome if either of them want to say anything just to the board, I would welcome that, and really just appreciate their work. I can't tell you, all three of them have contributed tremendously to the mission of the district and have been really great colleagues. So maybe we'll let Ray speak as the most senior employee of the district ever. I don't know if that's entirely true, but close.
Eric was.
Yeah.
But thank you, Andy. And what I'd like to say to the board is that I have really appreciated this board's and many previous board support when I've brought sometimes fairly costly items to your attention to complete projects or to get repairs done. And that's been really great to have the board's support over the years. It's been quite the privilege to serve the folks of Western Colorado this way. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Jim, do you have
Wait a minute, I have to run out and get my lift job application. This is like the long goodbye, and that's okay. You know, this has been the best job I've ever had. I've enjoyed working with all my colleagues and board members for the last 15 years. It's very satisfying work. It's important work, and it's all about Western Colorado, even though I live in Eastern Colorado right now. But yeah, thank you everybody for your support. We've done great work, and I would like to echo what Peter said about Andy. He certainly drove the bus on this whole ballot thing, and it wouldn't have happened without his energy and ability to talk and be conversant. And good job, Andy. And I think the River District is going to have a great future with this money, and the board will have fun trying to figure out how to spend it. And I'll miss Mark Catlin's radio show.
You can always tune in.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it. And I just want to say, John Courier has already had his technical last day in the office, although we do keep using his skills. So John's not on this call, not on this meeting that I know of. So
he's logged in.
John at all.
Yeah. He's not on here, okay? Because he's showing.
There, John. It looks like he's logged on.
Yeah.
Is he on? John, are you on? I'm sorry if you are, John. I didn't see that.
Turn your camera on, John. We'll talk to you.
Well, it appears that he may be logged on, but he may be multitasking. So.
Okay. Oh well. And I think this comment might apply to both Ray and to Jim. Comment I heard about somebody retiring, but they'll be okay because they each have a pickup truck and a wife, and they both work. So we live in the Western Colorado dream, right? And we also have some board members that are not going to be here come January, I believe. And if any, normally we would have an opportunity to get together and thank everybody for their service, but that may be for a while. So if any board members plan to not be at the board member of the January board meeting, we're going to give them an opportunity now to make comments.
Well, I will not be back in January, but I have really enjoyed my time with all of you and feeling connected to the whole Western Slope, not just Summit County. So I just appreciate the staff immensely and all the board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And Mr. Trampy, you said you were not going to be coming back in January. You and I have worked together for quite a while, and would you like to make any comments at this point? You've always had good points to make.
I doubt if I could make any good points today.
Well, you always do, yes.
No, I think it's time for me to step down. I've been here way too long, probably. But, you know, I've seen a lot of change in the district, and I've seen a lot of change within the river district. I've seen a lot of change within the kind of people that are representing the various counties. And so I think that's all good. I have no idea who's going to be following me. I know there's a heated contest appears to be brewing, but who is going to be the replacement? I have no idea. It may be your former employee, from what I gather. I think Sonia would do a very good job if she's the one that's appointed. But as I was telling somebody the other day, they wanted to know why I wanted to step down or why I was thinking about stepping down. And I think over the last 3, 4, 5 years, it's really come to me that the hardest part of the job of a river district director is to be fair and unbiased about representing your constituency. Here in the Gunnison Valley, I'm pegged as a rancher that's not representing the environmentalists. I'm not representing the tourism industry at all. And I don't know if any of the rest of you are faced with that. But I was really taken back at those comments, primarily because that's not the way I think I'm representing. So I think it's really important for all of us to be able to keep that in mind when you're voting and developing policy, that are we really representing the true basis of our local constituents? And only you as directors can answer that question. And maybe it's not a fair question in certain situations, but to me, that was my biggest challenge in the last 2, 3 terms that I've been with you folks. I have to be honest, I'll miss you. I've thoroughly enjoyed the, 21 years out of the past 24, way too many, but it's been an interesting journey. It's been an extremely educational journey for me. The little country boy came to the big time in a lot of different times, and the responsibility that the previous boards gave to me over the years, it was mind-boggling that you would give those kind of responsibilities to a guy that is most happy on the end of an irrigating shovel or in the saddle. And so I was not always comfortable in the positions that you put me in, but I tried my damnedest and hopefully it was good enough. So thank you.
Well, Bill, from my point, you know, I really enjoyed working with you over these past, 2.5 decades, essentially, both as staff to board and then as a board member to board member. You brought a dose of reality to the district and our deliberations. You know, the fact that you do know water at the end of a shovel is important, and it always will be important. You really have brought something to the district that we need to look at all of our uses, and you continue to make us focus on that. Frankly, without the agriculture, I don't know that the recreation and tourism would be as desirable. It would be far more profitable to sell off for condos and cows, but what does that do ultimately? So you brought a lot to the district, and I hope that your successor can do the same. So it'll be a tough shoes to fill there. I said my goodbyes in October, but thank you to everybody for everything. It's been a great ride, and it's been great folks to work with. You've got a big challenge looking forward the next few years on the expenditures, but you've got some great staff to do it. So I appreciate everybody that I've worked with over the years. And at this point, I guess I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
A motion to adjourn by Mr. Acquafresca. It does not need a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. I'll probably dial in January just to listen to you guys a bit. So hopefully by July, you can have an in-person board meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
God bless all.